So here's my USB key, and in this case it's a Sony, and you'll see it's an 8GB little Sony USB key which I've had for a while. One of my kids nearly trashed it because it sticks out a fair way and they go bumbling past and come pretty close to snapping them off sometimes. So what we do is we take that and we find a USB port on the front of the computer, like that one, and just shove it in. And you probably just hear it go da-da. That was the operating system agreeing that it's found something. We'll wait for it to reboot, and it's a good idea to get ready with your hand. In this case, we're going to hold our finger over the F8 button, and we do that now. When the splash screen comes up, it shouldn't be too far away. There we go. See, it says press delete to enter setup. I already know that I have the USB key option enabled in my BIOS, so we're just going to do this now. You'll see there in that list there is Sony Storage Media 100. I'm going to hit that, and in this case I've got the SODU Rescue disk on the actual USB key. I'll go into more about how to make one of those and what you can do with it in later videos. There's probably about 10 videos I could show you on that alone. So that's how, in this case, instead of booting to Windows, we've booted to an alternative, in this case Linux operating system. There are various utilities and things that you can use within this. Here in Boot CD is a popular one. It's got a whole bunch of tools, absolute massive bunch of tools on the one USB key. In this case the USB key is 8GB. You might actually want to head towards 16 because there are some new options with SODU if you ever get around to making one. You can actually install Windows from Windows images of the disk, the actual installation disks. There's a Windows all-in-one image that you can use to install Windows 7, or you could install Windows XP, or whatever you like really. So in this case, we're not going to go into this because it will take too long, and there's plenty of things there for another video. What we're going to do is we're going to reboot, and this time we're going to press delete so that I can show you how to get into the BIOS. In your computer, if it's not an Asus and it's not my particular motherboard, the M3HT Deluxe series, which is not old but it's not young, I'm just pressing delete now. Your options in your BIOS are going to be different to mine, but they'll be along a similar vein. That's your main screen that gives you system date and time, tells you what hard disks you've got connected to which SATA channels, tells you how much memory you've got there. In this case I've got just over 6GB. This is your advanced menu. This is where you get into a lot of the motherboard settings, your chipset, your onboard devices, the way you've got your CPU configured. This is where you go to overclock your memory or your graphics card or your CPU, if that's what you want to do. This is your power options, so your suspend states, what happens when you press the power button, things like that. And this is what we're interested in today. It's boot. In this case we've got boot device priorities, the first option, and you can see the first boot device is set to hard disk, the second boot device is set to CD-ROM, so you could actually burn a CD-ROM and put it in a drive and do exactly the same thing as we did before, except instead of selecting on the F8 menu the Sony disk, you would select whatever disk drive you put your CD into or DVD into and boot from that. And then at the end we've got removable, and it's important that this is actually enabled because in some cases you'll find there'll be a setting in your BIOS that might actually prevent you from booting from a USB key, particularly in networked environments. Particularly if your workstation actually boots from an image on the server, you might actually find that via group policy your USB key has been rendered completely disabled, and you won't be able to do this in those kinds of environments. It just depends a little bit. It depends how your system's set up. In this case, we're talking mainly home users. Now, the reason why you might want to do this, of course, is to scan your computer for viruses. You might have a problem where your computer won't boot and you can't figure out why. You might need a tool to sort of sort through that. You might want to delete a particular file on your machine that Windows won't let you delete if you go in via the Windows operating system. There's a whole plethora of reasons as to why you might want to boot from a USB key. But that's how you do it. And in this case, if I hit enter, it'll give me some options there. I can disable that. I can change it to CD-ROM. I can do whatever I like with that. But I'm not going to change it because I'm quite happy for it to stay that way. So we just escape out of there. In my case, I've got the option of having, let's just have a look in there for a sec. Yeah, that gives you a couple of other options, but nothing that's particularly relevant to this tutorial. You can actually set up a password so that nobody can get into your BIOS and change the options. It is possible to clear that password. What you have to do is either change the jumper settings on the motherboard to clear it, or the other way you can do it is to remove the lithium battery from the motherboard, of course with everything unplugged and using anti-static precautions so that you don't break anything. You could remove the lithium battery, or you could move the jumper across. Your motherboard manual usually has some explanations as to how to do that, and that'll clear all of the data on your motherboard. It'll clear all of the information that's been programmed into the CMOS, the composite metal oxide semiconductor. And it's your CMOS that communicates with your BIOS, and that's what it does. It does that to figure out what hardware you've got installed and boot the computer based on what's actually there. But you can set up a password if you want. I'm digressing, to prevent someone from changing his BIOS settings without your consent. Not that that's likely. In this case, I've got overclocking profiles. I've got this thing called ExpressGate, which in this case is disabled. If we enable that, it'd be interesting to see. I'll show you what happens when we reboot. It probably will work. Sometimes it doesn't. So now we'll press F10 and it'll ask to save the changes. We'll press yes. And the idea now is that we boot back into our operating system. I've actually removed that USB key. In this case, you should get that initial splash screen that we got, the green one, with the type of motherboard that's installed. It should come up. No, it's been replaced with Asus ExpressGate. So you've got about 10 seconds to decide what you want to do, and you've got those options there. You don't even have to boot into Windows. You can go to Skype, you can go into the BIOS, you can just boot to Windows, you can do stuff without actually having the Windows operating system up and running. Here we go. Starting Windows. I usually have ExpressGate disabled because I don't use it very much. But you know, if Windows won't boot, you could always, if you need to get on the net for some reason and you just don't have time to fix it now, if you've got ExpressGate, which is usually something that you'll find on Asus motherboards, then you can go in there and enable that option, and at least you'll be able to browse the internet and read your email and things like that.